Okay, I want to welcome everybody back to another program here at allpointstv.com. I'm George Moss again here, and we have a special person in the studio who tells me that he's been here on a number of occasions with another program we do here at allpointstv.com, and I'm very glad to sit here with him. He is a Bernie Sanders supporter, and I'm a Donald Trump supporter, so it should be very conversation. Mr. Eric Gunnels, I want to thank you for coming in, and you're at home here because you've done programs here before.
Yes, thank you, George, for having me. It's
always
a good time to be in the studio at All Points TV, and I'm glad to be on your show.
Okay, and we've been talking to each other off the camera, and so I'm getting to know more about Eric. I feel like I've known him already for a while. Let me ask you, Eric, why you think that since everybody's talking about socialism and Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist, what do you see as the difference between a socialist and a democratic socialist?
As Bernie describes it, a democratic socialist is basically the idea that we're going to have the people more involved in the decision-making process. That basically it's about. I think that we have a lot of socialistic programs in the United States right now, and really, we do have a very large portion of our economy is already a socialistic economy. Mm-hmm. And capitalism sort of works on top of that, or in another way of just saying it, sort of feeds off of a socialized program. As when the taxpayers put in a huge amount of money to something, then all these capitalistic jobs can be created on top of that to make that socialistic program come to fruition. And what Bernie's really kind of shown us that he's all about is saying, look, we're spending too much on the military. We're spending too much over here or over here, and we should be taking that money and putting it into different programs and going a different direction. I think that's where I see the difference between a socialist and a democratic socialist. Mm-hmm. Is that. So
a democratic socialist would be what, more of the people? I mean, is it more market based than socialism would be, or I mean, how does it share the room with market forces?
Well, that's difficult to say, because I think what we're heading into is an era of how we describe a market. Is the market just numbers on a piece of paper, or are we going to consider the market to be people and the value of people and what people needs are? And I think that we've seen many of the candidates on the Democratic side kind of come up and say, it's about putting people first. It's about putting the idea of the person and the value of human life over the value of money. Mm-hmm. And I think what we've had for a long time in this country is a capitalistic society which puts the priorities of money and profit over social or environmental concern. And I think that's what Bernie's trying to change. He's saying, look, if we're going to have an economy, we need to have an economy that works for everybody, not just a few. And I think that we've seen this country's benefits and the wealth of this country go to the top 1% and to the top 20%, and not to necessarily the bottom half of it.
When I look at and I'm with you on all of the idealistic things. I was very idealistic when I was in my youthful period, and I had so many different ideas about what was possible, and I was going to change the world. You know how we are when we are young.
Sure. I still have some of those ambitions. I think Bernie does too, and look at how old that guy is.
I wonder. My wonderment is whether or not that idealistic picture of the way the mechanics of society work, if that's really applicable in the quote unquote, they say the real world, meaning that can you take it off of the paper where everything sounds good, but where do you say it's ever worked? Let's
Oh, like give an example of where socialism.
Yeah, where it has been applied, so that off the paper, it's the application of it is. The theoreticals are great. I agree with all the theoreticals, but I don't see the application anywhere where off the paper it's actually been applied, and then it's incentivized effort, and it's been the utilitarian types of things that's talked about.
Sure.
That it offers, that it promises.
Well, I think to look at other countries, such as like Venezuela and places where obviously having a predominant socialistic society, that society has obviously failed miserably, and I think that many people can agree with that. But I would say that a perfect example, and I didn't even know this example until a candidate by the name of Andrew Yang jumped on the Democratic platform this election cycle. And for those of the the listeners that already know who Andrew Yang is, but if you don't know who he is, he was a presidential candidate running for this election against Bernie Sanders, but he has currently dropped out. He has suspended his campaign. That's because he did not get the votes in Iowa or New Hampshire that he was expecting. Therefore, he did the math and said, okay, I'm not going to win the election, so I'm going to drop out early. Which I think was a smart thing for him to do. But however, he brought a different conversation to the debate platform, one that I had never really heard and understood before. Because I'll be honest with you, in my younger days, I was totally against the idea of a universal basic income, and I was very much anti the current state of welfare programs that we have. I could see, originally in my younger days, I really should let everybody know, I was had come from more of a conservative background. Mm-hmm. So I had more of a conservative voting record, and that changed in recent years. I now am a current trustee of my township. I'm a Democrat. I ran as a Democratic platform as the trustee. I ran as a Democratic platform for state representative. And I voted democratically all the way through this last election cycle. So I think what I'm trying to say is that Andrew Yang brought a debate and a debate of a socialistic platform idea, which was the idea of a universal basic income for all. And a couple things that Andrew Yang taught me that I didn't know before was that not only did one of the founding fathers of the country, Thomas Paine, was a big advocate for universal basic income. And Martin Luther King was also a big advocate for universal basic income. Not only that, but economists like Milton Friedman, and during the late 1960s, I think there was like over 100 economists that actually came forward and said that a universal basic income would be a great solution to an economic boost for the future of our country. Yet that conversation sort of ceased and stopped, and we haven't really had that conversation until now, until Andrew Yang came on the stage and brought it forward. And getting back to your question, where do I see it as an example of socialism working and actually working well, successfully? And Andrew Yang brought out something I'd never known either, which was Alaska. And I'm picking Alaska to answer your question, okay, because to try to point out another country and to try to explain how another country like Denmark or something like that works efficiently with a socialistic type of society is more difficult because it's a foreign country. It's a place I've never been. But this is Alaska is still part of the United States, and Alaska is a red state. It is a Republican, conservative, controlled and dominated state. Mm-hmm. The governor is Republican, and yet this socialized program that Alaska has, which is the oil, the benefit check that everyone in Alaska receives up to like $1,000 to $2,000 a month, mm-hmm, from their check for the oil industry. Well, that was a Republican and conservative instituted program, and it's working quite well, and it works. In fact, it works really well, and that's been working for I believe now 37 years is the last. I think if I'm correct on that. So for 37 years, that's been working that way, and those people have been receiving a check per month. Now, what does that do? I think it raises the standard of living. It takes off the stress and the social stratification of keeping up. Which I think if you relieve that stress, you bring up everybody out of the stress of poverty, then everybody becomes healthier. Mental health goes up. Mental IQ goes up. Being able to focus and set life goals that are then more easily attainable is more prevalent in a society where you have that cushion getting everybody out of the poverty. What I don't like to see in my society is everybody's struggling. And when people are struggling, and when they're struggling from paycheck to paycheck, and when the income-wealth gap inequality is so extreme, even from community to community, it's so extreme that we have it's like we're creating systemic violence by that stratification. Like, for example, a study was done on several metropolitan areas with a population of over 1 million that showed that a 1% increase in unemployment raises a 6.7% increase in violent crime and robbery.
Okay.
So I think when you look at those numbers and those stats, you begin to see that, okay, we could raise the standard of living a little bit for everybody, and it wouldn't hurt the economy, but it would actually improve the economy, spread out a little bit of wealth, and if we did that, we would have a lot safer, more intelligent, and uplifted economy with a lot more altruism in it.
Yeah, I love the ideas of the ideas of socialism are great ideas. I wonder, in terms of the application, let me read a couple of things to you of an article I brought to the studio and ask you to respond to some of the points I made here. This article says a lot about the 2020 Democratic field when Michael Bloomberg's defense of capitalism became a point of offense during his first presidential debate. He says, "We're not going to throw out capitalism," Bloomberg said. "We are already tried that. Other countries tried it. It was called communism and it just didn't work." So is there a distinction to be made between socialism and communism?
I think today, especially amongst people my generation or younger, the word communism really doesn't have much of a meaning anymore. And it doesn't because, we're not coming out of a Cold War situation where the winners of that Cold War try to enslave the losers of that war. And essentially, that kind of sort of transitions from, sort of the nice picture of communism to more of fascism. And that means, you have essentially what that means, you just have a rich ruling elite that forces everybody else to work either at gunpoint or by subjection of some other punishment. And so I think that's I would happen to agree with Bloomberg on that one. I don't think capitalism is going to go away just because Bernie Sanders gets elected. I don't think capitalism is going to go away just because Andrew Yang or some other candidate comes up to introduce a universal basic income, or as Andrew Yang calls it, a freedom dividend. I don't believe that is going to ever really eliminate, or really, for that matter, change radically the idea of capitalism and the function of capitalism that we have in this country. Because we are a very, very rich and wealthy nation. We also live in a continent with a very diverse landscape and a wide range of resources that America has through innovation, technology, and our agricultural industry, things like that. We are really the predominant, we're the breadbasket of the world. We really feed, we produce more food here. We really do produce a lot of goods that are sold and traded around the world. So with that in mind, and on just a simple day-to-day local level, capitalism will always exist, even at the local level of hiring someone to mow your yard, because obviously the more well people are doing and the more disposable income that people have, the more you're going to pay people to do other things and services. So those things are not going to go away anytime soon. But what I do see as the issue is that we're running out of industry to capitalize on for everyone. And so I happen to agree with Andrew Yang that we are going through what we are calling today the fourth industrial revolution. And that more so, if you look at the states, especially the swing states where Donald Trump won the election, that's Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, states like that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs. when a lot of people think, oh, it's this, it's the Latinos or the Mexicans taking our jobs. Well, that's not the case. It's really, I mean, at least in Michigan, okay? Because I'm
agreeing with you. You're right. Automation is taking a lot of jobs away.
It is, and to be fair,
that's what automation is.
Yeah, and to be fair to the states like Texas, Nevada, states that are closer to the border of Mexico. I guess I can't speak for those states, and I know that those states and a lot of people in those states, they feel a high volume or concentration of Latino people or immigration. They see immigration a lot more than what we do in Michigan. However, so I could see from like a state like Nevada's position that they are suggesting that a lot of Mexicans or a lot of immigrants are taking their jobs, but I can see how they think that. But if you look at the bigger picture, it is automation which is really taking away jobs.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah,
I tell you what the American people think about some of the issues that Bernie Sanders seems to represent, and is my concern as well. The state. What do you see that the state playing a bigger role? It seems to me the state already is playing too much of a role in the marketplace as it is, and
yes.
It seems like it will be more so the case with socialism. Although I think we both agree that we are pretty much a socialist country now.
Yes.
Well, what percentage would you say is that?
Well, you bring up an interesting point, because that is certainly a question. It is a question of, if we vote for Bernie Sanders, are we inadvertently making government bigger, and is he going to make government bigger? And as we kind of all have this, it's almost ubiquitous in society that we all have this clear understanding that whenever government gets too involved in something, they mess it up.
100% of the time.
Yeah, we can agree on that, and that's where
my fear.
Sure, and I tell you what, that's a legitimate fear, and I believe that a lot of our libertarian friends and associates feel strongly about that. They feel very strongly. They say, look, I mean, if we should be heading a direction at all, we should be heading in a direction of less government, not more. I can absolutely agree with that, but what I see Bernie Sanders representing more than bigger government is I see Bernie representing a revolutionary voice of the people. Bernie Sanders speaks with such a revolutionary tone. I mean, when he stands in front of a microphone, it's not, I've got this cute little idea and I think my idea is better. No, he stands up there and says, we are going to take on the fossil fuel industry. We are going to take on the too big to fail banks. We're going to take on the insurance companies. We're going to take on the drug companies. We're going to take on the establishment. And the establishment, I would have to paint this picture as the establishment is already big. It's already huge. And the establishment doesn't want Bernie. So if the establishment, you see what I'm saying? So if the establishment is this big scary thing that we all don't like and don't want, well, the establishment is shaking in their boots right now because of Bernie Sanders, and they know that Bernie Sanders is going to upset. He's going to upset the structure system so badly that it's going to bring about a lot of radical, and I say radical because everyone teases Bernie about being radical, but his ideas are not that radical. When you look at the healthcare system and you look at the gross GDP of the nation, I mean, we're looking at like roughly a 17.9, the last figure I looked at. 17.9% of the gross GDP is of the healthcare system. But really, what does that number actually represent? That number actually represents sick and dying people. And that has an inverse relationship to the health and productivity of a nation. Whereas I look at, if we wrangle in the healthcare system of our country, which I think is way out of control, and I think is too... it operates under what I would call a vulture capitalism, and the healthcare. So essentially, the healthcare system is predicated on sick and dying people. Like you're gonna pay money or you're gonna die, or you're gonna pay for money. You have to pay money for insurance, or we toss you outside. But even though that theory sort of rings true with a profit-based healthcare system, that's not really the case. We really do have a socialistic healthcare system, because I don't know of anybody that gets turned away from the hospital. If you get shot and you go to the hospital and you're bleeding out, they're going to take care of you. They're going to take care of you. It doesn't matter whether you have insurance or not. No one's going to just stand around and let somebody bleed to death. If you an elderly person that falls down and breaks their hip, we don't. That person doesn't. Even if that person has no health insurance, never applied for health insurance, and they, they're just as poor as what poor can be. And even though the hospital knows that person is that poor and has no money and has no means of paying the bill, they're still going to take care of that person. Doesn't matter whether they're white or they're black or they're woman or they're gay or they're straight. It doesn't matter. They're going to take care of that person. We already kind of have a healthcare system that takes care of everybody anyway. What I think Bernie is saying is that we need to take out the middleman. We need to take out the insurance companies, which are not doing anything but just shoving their hand in the cookie jar and scalping off the top. And they're getting rich off of this Ponzi scheme, which has been created over a 100-year, or maybe a little longer than that actually. But it's a system that's been predicated on that sort of thing. I know a person that his wife got cancer, and they spent tens of thousands. He spent tens of thousands of dollars to try to help his wife and all that through the amount of money that he spent on it. His wife still ended up dying, and he ended up later losing his house because of his financial loss. I don't like to see that done to people. I don't think anybody wants to see that. I don't think that I don't think that. So when I look at that, and I try to think, okay, what's Bernie really trying to do? He's trying to say, look, we should not be profiting off of a healthcare system when we should be take out the middleman, a single payer system, get the insurance companies right out of the way. They're not doing anything productive. I mean, in a sense, I don't even like the idea of insurance anyway, because it's like a company is selling an invisible product. It's really irrelevant when you look at the bigger picture of things, and you start.
More. It seems to me that the socialist model almost demands more government. I'm a free market person. I don't think we have much of the free market left, but
I don't think we do either.
My incentive for the kind of structure I'm looking for is what the framers tried to put in place, which is limited government.
Absolutely.
And one of the things they were doing in that room, as I was talking about in my program last time we did a program here at the studio, was to restrain government. I'm a small government person. I think that big government means less liberty. The two can't coexist.
Yes.
And so my concern, if I listen to Bernie Sanders' program, I'm horrified by some aspects of it, because I think he's talking about redistribution of wealth, for example, and trying to mandate how much income you can have and how that is in fact spread over the whole population. Is egalitarianism. And capitalism implies inequality. You're never going to have equal wealth, because it's going to be incentivized by effort and so on.
That's true.
If I can be convinced that something works better than the incentivization of your own effort, and therefore the profit accrues you comes out of that effort. If I can find something that we put in place of that and it works to the benefit of the greater number, I'm all for it. The theoreticals I love about what you're saying, Eric. My concern is that I can't see a model that you take off the paper and then apply it where it's been incentivized to create the things we talk about. Venezuela was a rich country at one point, for example, and it's the bread lines that you're seeing right now, the absence of food, the model of that, and also what you saw in Zimbabwe and where it's been, tried. What I see is like a locust kind of thing that leads in its path. It destroys everything in its path. It doesn't incentivize anyone to put anything in its place. And so that's the concern I have. I think Bernie Sanders is a good person, and I think you're a great person, just talking to you about your ideals and so on and so forth. But those of us who are in the other camp, we are kind of frightened by, it seems that we're talking about more government.
More government, right? Bigger expansion of government, right? And I see that. I see that a lot. I see the concerns that people have about a government growing too big and too out of control. But what I think is we need to realize that if we don't get a candidate that's strong enough like Bernie to stand up to the big banks, to stand up to because look, I mean, during the 2007 housing crisis, I mean, we bailed out Wall Street and the big banks to the tune of $4 trillion. And I don't remember, as Andrew Yang would put it, I don't remember anybody saying that we didn't have enough money to bail them out. Okay, and so so all that debt went onto the backs of the American people. Well, I think Bernie Sanders makes an incredibly strong and valid point when he talks about eliminating school debt for college students and using Wall Street speculation as the means to pay for it. We bailed out Wall Street, as Bernie Sanders has said. It's time for Wall Street to bail us out now. And I think that's a good thing, because I owned a home that I worked, and I tried hard to live the American dream, because that's what I was taught in school. Oh, you work hard and you put forth your greatest efforts, you're going to live in a great life. Well, I did that. I mean, I worked hard. I built my own house from the ground up. I mean, every single thing about the house, the foundation. I used to be a construction worker. I used to operate heavy equipment, and I used to pour concrete. That was my field of forte. So I built my own home from the ground up, and I had a beautiful home. But during the mortgage crisis, boom. I mean, the construction work dropped out. The economy dropped out. I could no longer make the house payments. We bailed out Wall Street. Oh, okay, it was for the purpose of, okay, well, they're going to bail out the people with these, in the housing market, right? Well, that money never came. And it was all like, I kept seeing on the news, oh, if you're in trouble of losing your home, go here, and these people will help you, and the bailout money will trickle down, and you'll save your home. That didn't happen. I went to every single one of these organizations looking for help, and they go, sorry, we can't help you. Sorry, we can't help you. Sorry, we can't help you. And I'm like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. And then I'm actually looking at the assessable taxable value of my home, and I'm going like, well, wait a minute. If my home is not even worth that much anymore, why am I paying the property? Why are my property taxes still up here now? Why didn't my property taxes go down? So I go to my local government, and I'm going like, hey, hello, didn't you hear that we gave $4 trillion to the banks? Didn't you hear on the news that we're supposed to help people in the housing crisis? You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like they didn't even know what I was talking about. What do you mean? Well, I'm like, well, look at my assessable taxable value. Look at what my house is worth today. Why aren't my taxes coming down? And they're looking at me going like, oh, that doesn't work that way, son. So, of course, I was in my younger days. I was in my mid-20s when this happened, and or mid to late 20s, I should say. And that didn't happen. And I looked at my government. And I'm going like, wait a minute here. Where's the control mechanism here? I thought I had elected leaders that knew what was going on. Okay, cool. We're supposed to make adjustments for this. No, that didn't happen. I got capitalized on, and the people that we bailed out for Wall Street took vacations on yachts, you know what I mean, around the world, eating steak and shrimp every day.
Yeah, I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying, and we are on the same page in a lot of what you're saying.
Sure.
I just do not think that government is the answer. They say too big to fail. No business is too big to fail. If you built your business up and it cannot be capitalized within the operation that you set up, then I'm not privy to the your company compensating me for your size or your benefits. How am I responsible, therefore, for the liability that you create for yourself as a company? And why am I being looped into the too big to fail so government the bailout occurs? See, I'm against bailouts. I think that the market has determined who's going to be the services
Right.
there, and if you are not able to, in fact, compete in a marketplace, the market punishes you for that.
Yes.
So what we have here, and this is my difference with the socialist model. My difference is that I think that the market should make the determination. The $15 an hour thing, where government gets involved in as a bureaucratic operation, and tells the employer what the cost of labor would be,
Right, or the value of labor.
or the value of labor
Right,
would be.
right.
See, I don't think government has a role in that.
I tend to agree with you on that philosophy. I mean, I definitely think Bernie Sanders is my choice for president, but maybe not every single policy thing do I agree with 100% of it on him with, and maybe, but there's a bigger picture though, and I'll look at this like Bernie Sanders wants to legalize marijuana, okay?
Okay.
And legalizing marijuana, well, to bring back to full circle to our question of, does it make government bigger or smaller by legalizing marijuana? Just legalizing marijuana alone should make government smaller, especially the police state. When you look at drug policy, when you look at how amped up our police state has gotten since 9/11 especially, but since Nixon's drug war in 1971, it got huge. And we incarcerate, 65% of all people incarcerated now, whether it's jail or prison, are there for a non-violent drug offense. So essentially, we created a massive governmental program by creating a sort of a predicated nature of police on warring on non-violent people. When you legalize marijuana, well, that's opening up the door for another conversation, which is, as soon as he legalizes marijuana, now we need to have a conversation of shrinking the criminal justice system. I mean, to the tune of, I think, somewhere around 30 to 40% of the entire criminal justice system budget is allocated toward marijuana. If you look at the arrest rates, if you look at the number of people, or the number of drugs that they test, it's like marijuana is like 57%. All the other drugs are like down at 1% and 2% and 3%. It's a major difference. You take marijuana prohibition out of the thing, the government, you basically lose all drug prohibition, and the government knows that. That's one of the reasons that they're scared about Bernie, because they know that he is going to eliminate portions of government that were doing that before, that no longer need to exist after he legalizes marijuana. After he legalizes marijuana, there's a large portion of the criminal justice system that no longer even needs to exist.
Yeah,
so that in itself will be
point.
Shrinking government,
Yeah.
not making it bigger.
What do you think is going to happen in Bernie Sanders' campaign? They do not want him as the candidate over the Democratic Party, and I was just wondering, what do you see happening if they try to do in 2020 what they did in 2016?
Oh, there's no question. There's no question or doubt about it in my mind. If Bernie Sanders is not the 2020 Democratic nominee, Donald Trump will be president. And I told people that 6 months before the 2016 election even took place. I told people, I said, unless everybody gets behind Bernie, Donald Trump is going to be our president. Even the chairperson from the DNC that was here in Michigan at the time of the Bernie Sanders campaign, I walked up to him and I spoke to him, and I said, after Bernie had won Michigan by a landslide over Hillary, I told him, I said, listen, you go back and you tell the rest of the DNC and they better choose Bernie Sanders because he laughed at me. He said, oh, I don't think it matters. Michigan will vote for Hillary. And I looked at him and I goes, Michigan will not vote for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. It's just, and I knew that, and I told him, I said, you better choose Bernie, or Trump's going to be president. Well, bottom line.
And I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing.
Yeah, no, right.
No, we're having. I'm really enjoying what you're saying, because you're a very good representative, by the way, of Bernie Sanders' campaign. I think Bernie's going to be a
compliment. Thank you.
Okay, they're telling us to wrap it up, but let me ask you real quickly. So where is Bernie Sanders with the Second Amendment?
That, to me, that's probably the one thing I don't agree all with Bernie on his policies. I ran as a Democratic candidate, and I don't believe in banning guns. And here's why. Anytime you prohibit something, just as we learned with drug prohibition, just as we learned with prohibition of alcohol, If you study history, prohibition. When you prohibit something, you lose all regulation and control. That's the bottom line. If we try to prohibit or ban guns, oh my word, we're going to create an entirely enormous black market of that. And not only is it going to be a black market, but it will also be very, very divisive to the country. It will cause Republicans or even swing voters that are independents and people that haven't made up their mind yet. It will cause them to lean more Republican because they fear their Second Amendment rights being challenged.
Yes.
And so I think if Bernie Sanders was smart, he would appoint someone like me to be a council person in his cabinet or his administration, because I happen to know a lot about guns and I happen to know a lot about marijuana policy. I think those are my two strongest points. And I'm a defender of the Second Amendment, and I think that we can have other more wiser and better gun policies that will help keep gun violence at a minimum, but will still allow the Second Amendment to be very unmolested. And if you look at the statistics, it's a lot of young people that we have a problem with. So I think maybe it's time for a conversation to say, okay, look, let's make it nationwide universal concealed carry, but let's just say you can't do that until like age 25. Okay, then that just gives all the young people enough time to grow up and become adults and responsible adults before carrying around a concealed weapon gun. And I think that would make more sense, and I think we would see crime go down.
Eric, I have enjoyed having you as a guest on the program.
Thank you.
I came here to learn about Bernie Sanders' campaign. I can't think of a better representative here in Genesee County.
Thank you very much, George.
And look forward to talking to you further about that.
Awesome.
Okay, and John is telling me if I don't close this program down, he's going to throw me out of the studio.
Right on.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, Eric.
Thank you, George.
I definitely enjoyed your conversation. Okay, we're going to wrap the program up. John is telling us we're out of time. And I want you to stay tuned to all the programs here at allpointstv.com. And I want to thank you for listening to this program here. Thank you for tuning us in.